Hello and welcome to the DM's Travel Book Club, a guide to the planes. Each episode we explore one of the planes of existence as outlined in the Great Wheel cosmology in the role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons. My name is Fiona, and with me as always is my co-host Hamilton. Hello Hamilton, how are you doing?
Hello Fiona, how are you? I didn't
we're
answer
very-
your question.
Oh, we're very British. That's all you need to know about this show, is that we're very British and we're too polite to actually tell each other how we're feeling. So.
Yeah. So how are you? You go first.
Oh, you know what? I'm feeling incredibly neutral about things. Just very, sort of in the centre, done. How about yourself?
Surprising that, isn't it?
Yes.
Because so am I. I'm feeling very middling.
Very middling. Well, that isn't that convenient, because next stop on our huge sort of, exploring sort of journey around the cosmology.
Our gap year.
Our gap year, yes, is we're stopping off at the ultimate plane of lore. Yeah, we are stopping off at Mechanus. This amazing sort of unfeeling order. That's what I've got down here as a sort of thing. So Hamilton, what do you think when I say the word Mechanus to you? What sort of images come up? Even though I know you've read the small book as well.
Yes.
But what sort of feelings do you get
instantly it's gears, obviously, and
Instantly
hence
it's
the
gears.
backgrounds that we've got here. It's lots of gears moving, and I think that is a standard. And then Modrons.
And Modrons, yes. If you've listened to a very recent DM's book club, yes, we've sort of discussed Modrons as sort of beings that embody ultimate lore, who sort of live on this plane. So we'll come to those little
We
guys
mention
in
them
a second.
quite a lot in DM's Book Club generally, because we do love them.
We do love them. I'll admit. We'll try not to talk about them too much. We are going to
Yes.
focus on the plane itself, but they are. It's hard to talk about Mechanus without mentioning Modrons and Primus as well, so the deity that runs this place. So yes.
Yeah. So, Fiona.
That's me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're leading the charge for
I
Mechanus
am.
today. So tell me about the geography of Mechanus then.
The geography of Mechanus. So I want
Is
you
it
to think.
rolling hills like Arcadia?
Oh.
Is it tunnels like Pandemonium?
No, nothing
No.
like that at all. As you sort of described it, it's sort of, if you can imagine just there's sort of the interior of a clock, these idea of sort of spinning gears and cogs sort of going around in very slow sort of tick-tocking fashion, essentially. So it's sort of one of the defining features of Mechanus is that it's predictable as the drip of a water clock. It's the idea that things are still moving slowly and they are sort of shifting and changing into new variations. I think a lot of people think that ultimate law means everything is stop still and everything is motionless and just sort of like it is static. Whereas here in Mechanus, you have just such a huge collection of sort of gears, cogs, pulleys, just linking everything together. There's always like constant movement. It's full of life, and as a result, because everything's still moving forward, it's just sort of moving things forward, getting to a point. I mean, there are some theories that talk about these cogs being sort of the things that move the full multiverse, and so should one of them break, should a cog be taken away, the whole multiverse will just be stopped, and that would just be the end of everything.
Not
Is
good.
not great. You've seen that what happens to your grandfather's clocks. They sort of break and then you chuck them out into the heap, and that's it. You never see. How can you repair time if a huge cog is gone? So so this idea that we are sort of moving forward because it's sort of furthering the causes of law and order. If in doubt, think law and order. Think Modrons. Think any sort of police. Again, they are sort of the officers of law, and anything that happens, they're going to put down the law, essentially.
No, exactly. And I think the additional thing to note that we've mentioned that it's law, but it's also the neutrality of it, as we were saying, is that there is no leaning towards good or evil, which is interesting in that law. So it is law that is outside of any of those sorts of other categories of alignment. Whilst where we were last week in Arcadia, it was law, good, neutral, and we will go to law, good, which is next week. So there's just sort of it, and then obviously we'll hit some other evil ones. But I think it's just worth mentioning that, so that it's just pure law.
Yes,
in a sense.
Completely. Yeah, law and order comes before anything else.
Yeah,
which is the
exactly.
key thing to think of. Other things to sort of mention, sort of defining features, I would say. We've got there's no sort of star, sun, or moon at all. There's some of the gears actually are the ones that sort of share this sort of bright light. The sky is black. So you can imagine just like it's almost like I said, like the sort of interior of a clock just it's just darkness and these gears just sort of slowly turning in space. Speaking of, the air is breathable to every being, including underwater creatures. So if for whatever reason you have, I don't know, a star whale just suddenly appear, it'll be okay. It's not going to just flop on the ground and gum up one of the gears as it slowly turns into its death. I don't know why I said that out loud.
It's just become so graphic.
Oh no! Well, be assured.
Churned into oblivion.
Well, be assured that the Modrons will clean that up. So
yes, of course, that's what they're there for. There's an interesting piece in this book that it says about going to. It says one of the few places that the clueless, being plainers and people that have primes and stuff, people who aren't from the plains, don't long to go except perhaps the sightseers. Yes. And I think that's kind of what it comes to. And I think even reading it, I still find it very interesting. But it does feel very sightseeing unless you really want to get involved in lore and understanding laws, or trying to understand the real functioning of what the chant is of the place. Because other than that, it doesn't have the same sort of exploration, I feel, of some of the other ones. But I don't know if you agree with that.
Compared to the other planes that we visited, where it'd be like, oh, we're going to explore some unseen land, or we're going to find some treasure and stuff. Here in Mechanus, it is definitely it's definitely like, if you go here, you have to have a reason, and you have, for example, to get into the plane itself, there is a lot of paperwork. You have to fill it all in, you have to queue up, you have to get your permit or something like that, and then the guards will then choose where you go. If you might want to be like, I want to go to this particular cog at this time, they might go, hold up. According to this paperwork, you're more suited to go to this other place. So exactly. I think it's incredibly frustrating. If anything, one of my favourite bits and sort of comparisons I would give this to is, like, obviously, I'm sure we've all had admin to deal with. We've all been in those organisations where you're like, I just want to get this one thing, and you speak to someone, and then months later you get the permit long after you've solved the problem by doing it yourself without anyone knowing. But also, if you think of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the Vogons, this idea that everything has to be stamped and signed and triplicated and that sort of thing. So yeah, as a result, this feels like this big sort of barrier going, oh god, there's just such a lot of effort to get in there. There must, you must want to entice your party or your players into doing this. And I think you can do it, because there is places on Mechanus that don't have this sort of, everyone being so neutral. There's a place called Haven, which is this sort of safe place where you can be chaotic, within reason. It is okay for you to go there, so maybe that would be where you stay over. There's also other sort of realms, so I'm sure we'll talk about Mycelia very, very briefly if you want to sort of go there and explore sort of the Myconid kingdom down there as well. But I guess, what am I trying to say here? I think for me, I'd love to go. Maybe it's because you want to meet, or maybe you're returning something to Mechanus.
I think my point was more that it's just like you. It could hard to put into exact words, but I think the point was, it's like you feel like going to there feels like going to the council. Like, you go when you need to do something, and you go through all this stuff to get to a place that you need to go to do a particular task, which might be like understanding a law, trying to break a law, and trying to learn how to break a law, or wanting to use some fun things that we'll talk about later, like the orrery or something like that. But it's not like, let's just go to battle, because that just sounds freaking crazy. Do you know what I mean? Like, or let's go to Pandemonium because, like, we want to go find some awesome treasures in that third layer, or Mount Celestia, we need to go see one of these gods, which we'll talk about like later, or Asgard, because that sounds, people might enjoy that sort of like storyline. But Mechanus, it feels like, unless you just want to, as I said, the sightseeing thing, it feels more like let's go meet some Modrons, because that would be fun, and let's go break a law or two, or let's learn how to break a law. But that's kind of my feeling for it.
I guess, thinking of that, because obviously there is the Fortress of Disciplined Enlightenment, which is where the governors from sort of that faction from Sigil sort of are there. That's like a big law library in itself, so maybe you need to go do some research, for example. You maybe need to find some things. Also grants licenses for you to hunt outlaws as well. And I think maybe that's the big thing, is that maybe you get a lot of money, or there's big contracts to find rogue people who have broken laws on Mechanus. So then maybe that is the more drive. Like, it is not necessarily it's it is returning these sort of your bounties to Mechanus so that they can be judged by these different sort of courts and stuff like that. So maybe that's it as well, because they do talk about these different sort of patrols. Which I can't have to hand. There's like various types of lawgivers, so maybe you're going to be part of one of those sort of teams. They've got the Modrons, which are obviously the natural sort of beings that live on Mechanus. You've got the governors, you've got the vigilants, and you've got the mercy killers as well. So maybe you're part of one of those factions, or maybe you're trying to like cut off one of those factions to get the bounty before them, perhaps. So maybe that little sort of in-party tension as well.
No, it does sound cool. I think it's the other things like I guess like think as well like a Gehenna or something like that. You might even just stay in one of those places for longer, but this feels like a whistle stop tour sort of place.
And you know what? I don't think that's a problem. I think
I don't think it is at all. I'm not saying that's negative.
No.
I'm just saying it's particular to the.
I mean, maybe that's one of the things. It's I think that's the reason I love it so much. Is that it's just one of those things where you can do so much of it, but maybe it's only fleeting glances of this place. Because, like you said, it's not an ideal place for any party. I think, no matter how neutral they may feel they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Because let's talk about sort of the population and stuff of it. Those inhabitants that do live in Mechanus, whether they're sort of Modrons or whether they've come from other planes and decided to live here, what's great about them, I think this is great for a DM, is that everyone is frighteningly honest about things and exceedingly literal. And so that's that idea, because they don't wish to misinterpret anything you say, because that invites chaos. Okay. So this idea that if you ask someone to get you something, they might be like they might not take instruction from you because it's what you've said is just up for interpretation, or even just like completely ignore you because no, you're too chaotic.
You're gonna get caught out with your "could you get me something?" and they would say, "Well, yes." And you're like,
yes.
Will you please go and get me something? You have those classic,
you have to break it down.
Particularities of rule, which, unlike in other lawful places where those are going to trip you up in a dangerous way, they will just literally just ignore you or be very literal back. Whilst in battle or in the Feywild, those things will come back to bite you a lot harder. But I did like that they're so afraid of misinterpreting command, as I said to you, because of vagaries in language, that they simply do not take instruction. So
and on top of that as well is that if there is a crime that's committed, and it's not your party necessarily, instead of apprehending those people, they will instead go and report it to a higher authority. So I love this idea that they know when there's a law been broken, but they're like, but I don't want to get involved in case then I too also break a law.
Yeah, exactly.
So I will go report it. And so they'll either go report it, or, and this is the thing I really do
bloody
love.
grasses.
They either grass it up, or they'll be like, hey, you just broke a law, and then continue to follow that person.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. Could you imagine that? Yeah.
This person is like, I always think of the example.
Yeah.
I always think of the example of like, you've gone into the bathroom. You've gone into the bathroom to like change your t-shirt or something like that, and someone going, hey, you didn't wash your hands. Oh no, I was changing your t-shirt. No, excuse me, this person's not washed their hands. They've not washed their hands. They've not washed their hands. And you're just following them around saying, this person, don't shake their hand. They've not washed their hands.
I feel like you've met someone who's done this to you.
No, a friend of a friend. No, but but that's the example I can think of, is where you could just suddenly get a whole group of like people just pointing at you going, that they've done a crime. Excuse me, I wish to report a crime.
You're now making me think of is that scene at the end of not Notting Hill, Love Actually, where he's going to go marry. He wants to go and engage, and so they all come along and they go, "What's happening?" And the whole family and then the whole city, like village, come and follow him to go propose.
Yes, Colin Firth's character.
Yeah, exactly. So it's running on.
Oh, that's great. I love that. But.
So yeah, other than that, who else is there? There's the Fraternity of Order you mentioned, so the governors.
Yes. So the governors, So you know a little bit more about the governors than I do in this, but I thought I'd talk briefly about the sort of mathematicians. So this is actually quite interesting because they have their own little special page within Mechanus' book as well. Like, I've not read about them before, but there's this idea that, well, let's start at the top. So there is a theory that Mechanus is very similar in some teeny tiny way to Limbo. We've discussed Limbo a couple of episodes ago, where you as a person on Limbo could will something into existence. You imagine it and it would appear in sort of great detail and thing. And the same thing theoretically can happen in Mechanus, because this idea that this is the perfect place of law and order. So if you imagine something, like if it's logical for you to imagine it, then it must be true, and therefore it must exist on Mechanus somewhere. So this idea that I could be like, I can imagine this beautiful necklace made out of different coloured gems, and it just says Fiona is amazing, in great big Comic Sans font across the neckline.
Why would you do it in Comic Sans?
Why not? Because I can imagine it. Therefore, somewhere on Mechanus, on one of the cogs, there must be a little case that says to Fiona on it and have this necklace in. Yeah. So the mathematicians, they are devoted to find whether this is true or not, because that people have obviously to do this compared to Limbo, where it's like you imagine it and it happens. It's the idea that you can imagine it anywhere in the multiplanes, but then you have to travel to Mechanus, travel to where you think the cog is and everything like that. Yeah. And even then, it could be, it might not be exactly what you thought of, because again, your thoughts could be up for misinterpretation. So it gives the example of you thinking of like a field of beautiful, perfect grass, and you might just find one teeny blade of grass in between two sort of cogs, the teeth of the cogs, as it's sort of
so your thought of millions of treasures might just mean you sense a piece of gold, one piece of gold floating in space. And I think it's kind of interesting because it goes with that theory that there's that idea, isn't it, that as we are beings of creation and our brains are beings of creation, everything that we can think of as human beings must be available for creation, because we are only limited. We are limited by the creation, the universe that we're within, and therefore we could never think of anything outside of that universe. Therefore, if we believe that you could run at the speed of light, then it must physically be possible at some point in time. However, in order to get there, it doesn't mean that you can just do that because you think it. It's just that because you think it, there is a possibility of it happening. I
could just see now that meme of diagrams and notes coming out of your head, all these things happening. Because it's a big philosophy, right? Because obviously, and I think maybe it's a little bit too much maybe for your players, because they might go, what? Of course that's not real. But this sort of philosophy is then embedded into the mathematicians. So they believe that anything can be imagined and will exist in Mechanus, and so they will look for a way to find it. And you can become one of these mathematicians, but you have to be of a certain level and have a certain intelligence score in order to understand these amazingly high concepts.
Yes, exactly. Which I quite like.
But the sort of only little downside, or not even downside, but one thing I did thought was quite nice was that you must share any findings that you find with your brethren even. I can't even say that word, but again, as a really cool story hook, maybe you have been one of your party, or maybe someone that's close to the party has sort of enlisted them to come and help them find some treasure for the mathematicians, but then you've got to take on a couple of of NPCs, and they're just all there willing to talk to you about this and have these interesting conversations. You're just like, no idea what you're saying. No idea what you're saying. It's you can imagine the lesser intelligent, barbarians or rogues or whoever, anyone that doesn't. You're like, God, you're talking way too much. Like, what are you talking about? Because and that could make some really cool.
A bit like you're standing there in front of the architect from the Matrix 3.
Yeah, and it's like, wait, what? Just this is version 7? Yeah, exactly.
I think the thing that is kind of, I just thought of a good adventure that could go with it, is that the classic trope of there's a big godlike being that's trying to destroy the world, and you need to find the god-slaying weapon, and then you realise there is no such god-slaying weapon. And everyone's assuming everyone believes that there's possibly this the god killer sword or something like that, but there never is the god killer sword, and they're like, oh, no one ever existed. And they're like, oh, so what we're going to do? And then they go, well, let's go to Mechanus. Someone finds out this idea that if we go to Mechanus and think very hard about it, we might be able to will it into being or something like that. And
because that feels like such a really desperate one last try.
Yeah, exactly.
And so instantly I wanted to be at one last try, and it works. But it's something so silly, you think, it's a dragon slaying sword, and it actually
Yeah.
is like, you know, a teeny tiny like dagger or like a dessert spoon or something like
A
that.
dessert spoon, you're like, what the heck? And you try it, and then it actually works.
Works.
But,
They're like, no, my weakness, a dessert spoon. Anyway, before we go to any other sort of populations, it would be remiss of us not to talk briefly about Modrons. So this idea that these are sort of perfect, geometric and sort of numeratic, that's not even a word, but these shaped creatures essentially that have been created, and they're sort of made in this huge sort of like a hierarchy, incredible hive mind, that sort of thing. And according to this book, although I will say there's many different versions of them across all the editions, there are 15 divisions of Modrons, with Primus, their sort of deity, being at the top. And the idea is that, you know, if this sort of duties get filtered down from Primus for doing certain things, whether it is ruling over a region of one of the cogs to even just cleaning the teeth of the cogs from one to another. And it's sort of carried out in a sort of like, again, I will delegate this to you. Thank you very much. I will now delegate this to you, and so on and so forth. There is no sense of self. It is always we, the Modrons, we're doing this. And something that we picked up in our Modron episode, which I quite like, this idea that if you are speaking to a Modron, because they have no sense of self or no sort of like concept of it, and as a group of as a party, they will speak to the person they think is in charge, but if somebody else asks them a question, they will still direct their answer to the person they think is in charge, which I think is amazing, because then you're just completely ignoring all of the party and speaking to the one that speaks for everyone.
What's quite fun is you could do that to a party and just sort of make them roll for like charisma to see who they then sort of is the person or something like that. Or even just you could sort of mess with them, just make someone you think is the party leader or something like that. Be quite fun.
Exactly. The other thing to note about them is that they can only communicate. Modrons can only communicate with the level above and below them. So, for example, the lowest level, the Monodrons, they can only communicate with the Duodrons, which is above them, because that's what they can comprehend. The Duodrons can sort of communicate with the Monodrons and the Triodrons, which are above them as well. But this what's interesting, and compared to in this edition, it says that the further up a Modron goes, they do remember where they were previously. In 5th edition, they don't.
It says they don't. Yeah, that's what I thought. I prefer the old edition idea that they remember it, but they state that they can't communicate with one lower because they are way too advanced to communication, that the ones 2 steps below them wouldn't be able to understand them.
Yeah.
So they just can't communicate below because they cannot distill their information.
Can't even function. It is almost like a kindness in a way, saying I will pass this on because I'm just going to put it in layman's terms for you to pass it on.
And then you'll layman's it down even more, sort of thing.
Exactly. So again, what this advises to as well, they are, I will say, all 15 divisions of Modrons are listed. They're not all given stats and stuff like that, because I think to a point it's like it's going to be very hard to fight them as well. But you can easily add more Modrons in if you think of really cool shapes or all different numbers and stuff. You can easily do that as a DM, which I think will be quite cool. The other thing I wanted to mention is there's a very interesting comparison here from Modrons to I think it's devils and demons, essentially, because devils and demons, you know where you stand with them. It says like you understand that they hate you, that they're evil, and they're going to use you for their own goods, essentially. Whether it's sort of like through contracts or whether there's pure chaos and they're just out to fight you. You never know where you stand with a Modron, because they don't care about good or evil. They just care about law and order. And even though that law and order might be invisible to the human eye. So I love the idea that you are just always slightly on edge and they are sort of very unnerving, because you could say something, they go, does not compute. Okay. And then they'll just make their own mind up and go, nope, we will take you and you will be tried. Come with us. And you're like, what? Oh no, you jaywalked, you said a naughty word, you were clearly evil, or you're clearly broken the law.
The characters that you see, I can't think of the term in a movie, but there are characters like that where it's appearing that they're your friend, but then you realise they're like an alien structure where they are, I think it's mainly in like Star Trek, and then they conform to a higher theory, and then suddenly they're like, well, you broke the law, that's it, you're dead, sort of thing. Reminds me of that episode where Wesley in Star Trek Next Generation breaks where they have that place with the law called, I think it's called Judgment, and the episode, and he falls into a greenhouse, and they have this idea that if you're in the you can do. There's a place where you can. It's a place where there are no laws apart from one area that roams around the world. And if you're in the ultimate law area, you're killed if you break any law. And it's a completely stupid theory, but there's a really good scene with like a couple of good scenes of like arguments. But it just reminds me of that sort of like, oh, it's all seemingly fine, and then you do something very innocuous, and you're like, no, you're going to die now.
Yes.
And everyone's fine with
it's
it
all to
around
nothing.
you, and you're like, what the fuck? That's ridiculous. And they're like, yeah, no, that's how it works here, sort of thing. Like,
yeah,
wow.
absolutely. And this idea that the trials and stuff, that they will take you to trial. You know, as any lawbreaker, they will take to trial in Regulus, the main sort of Modron sort of layer, their realm, and they'll try you because they'll have evidence. They'll have evidence, and people will come and testify against you, even if they'll be like, oh yes, I did see them here at this time. Well, that confirms that they were there when the law was broken. And it just sort of mounts up against you, and you're like, hang on, that means nothing. So no, and it's just, again, the sneaky way that these people will just, again, like dogpile players with like paperwork and evidence that stacks against you, which is all circumstantial. It doesn't actually prove anything.
It's all the Brazil
which I
stuff.
love.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's 100%. It is Brazil. 100%.
That's the movie, not the country. Just to clarify.
Absolutely, yes. Clarify, and it's a great movie. Would recommend. The final thing I want to say on Modrons is that this thing about when they die, their life force is sort of reabsorbed back into Mechanus, and another Modron is promoted up the chain. So, for example, a Triodrone, if that is killed in battle or it just fades away, it just, in my head, it sort of rusts and just falls down, but there's nothing left of them. And then somewhere, whether it's on the plane of Mechanus or elsewhere in the multiverse, a Duodron will transform and become a Triodrone. And similarly, a Monodrone will then go up to be a Duodrone, and then another Monodrone will appear from somewhere. Exactly, now, it again, it's that sort of the idea of promoting stuff. There's no sort of like, it's going to be the person closest to us, it's going to be this particular person.
No, it's already preordained, isn't it?
Exactly.
Based on their existence, isn't it? Just they're literally the last one to have been born. So if you're that's it, isn't it? Yeah.
It's so cool. And yeah, it's just a very I think for me, because again, they're a cool creature to describe to players as well, and you could easily go in, like I said, if you're creating other Modrons, you can really just go ham and be like, cool, it's like a Mobius strip kind of one, or it's an Escher sort of staircase type one, or anything like that. And it just, again, as I've always said on this sort of show, that sometimes I'm overwhelmed by the description, but I'm like, that sounds really cool. I just cannot imagine it. It's this. I want definitely 3D or sort of like illusionary sort of Modrons where you're not entirely sure how they work, because that would be quite cool. And yeah, I just there's something, a very interesting sort of NPC to play, but also maybe a really cool sort of like information point, to give sort of guidance or lore, or even I think there's what is it, in Regulus there, to make sure you know what's going on. So if they can give you, that's right, a 300 volume portable lore summary that can be found at any of the bureaus. So I like the idea that they hand out, I don't know, carts or it's like Hitchhiker's Guides, isn't it? But I just like the idea that we still got them in hardback, and it's just 300 volumes of laws that you could just take around with you.
I think that's fantastic, though. Come on. I mean, you think they'd invented the iPad by now, but yeah, it's fine. We'll have to do.
Oh no! Because what if it gets hacked or something like that?
Oh, that's very true. Is it worth mentioning rogue Modrons, or is it worth just like?
Yeah, let's talk about rogue Modrons. Yeah. So sometimes change happens, as with all life, like things happen and mutate or something, and it gets to a point where a Modron might suddenly remember, or might suddenly start thinking as an individual rather than a team or a hive. And so as a result, they might start breaking laws themselves, because this idea of individuality is so sort of alien to the Modrons, and it is chaotic, right? Because as soon as you break away and you start thinking for yourself, it goes against what they've sort of preordained, as you said, so that sort of predetermined stuff. So they will send out bounty hunters and patrols of Modrons to hunt down rogue Modrons. But what I quite liked is that individual Modrons, when they break away, they can easily draw other Modrons underneath them, because they are seen as like, someone that is higher than us, that's telling us what to do. They just have to manipulate it in a certain way. So you could have a whole rogue Modron, like army or
squad, at least,
or squad, or even like maybe even like a gang of Modron thieves that's like under one sort of Modron mob boss.
Oh my gosh, now you've made it. Yes.
Because obviously for them, it'll make total sense. Because yes, we're acting within the law of the mob boss. On the day of my Modron's wedding. That's
I was trying to think of like, leave the gears, take the cannoli.
Oh. He's sleeping with the cogs. Anyway, but yes, as you can tell, there's a lot of fun you can
Or
have.
sleeping with the Mechanus would be more like.
Oh, very good.
Come on.
Very good.
There you go.
There you go. Now we have the Modron mod boss versus
the
the
Modrons.
Mechanid. The Mechanids of Mycelia, yes.
Yeah.
And let's quickly talk about Mycelia, because again, we're not going to talk about it too much, because I know you find it a little bit silly, but just to give it a little bit of context.
No, I don't. You can talk about it. It's fine. I didn't want to become me going, oh, Hamilton, here he's being down on something.
No, because I do think it's true. So Mycelia, this sort of realm of where the Myconids are, the god of the Myconids, which I believe you pronounce Silophia, I believe that's how you pronounce it.
Okay.
Okay. So what I quite like about it is that
it's that one.
you trust me. It's a huge sort of cavern with all these spores in it. There's like everywhere you walk, there's sort of like organic mulch, which then you realise is probably young myconids about to grow and stuff like that. What I quite like about it is that it is underneath a cog. Well, something we didn't sort of really cover is that both sides of a cog can be habitable, because the gravity, you can easily just step over, doing like a David Bowie labyrinth sort of style, go underneath, which is quite cool. But, and this is where I do agree with you on this, Hamilton, in order to get to Mycelia, this realm of the spores and to the Myconids, it's a paradox. The idea, if you want to get there, you have to walk away from it, and you can only get there when you're not looking for it, which sounds pointless.
I get it. Like, as in, I get it. I get the philosophical idea behind it. It's the conceptual thing. It works, but it also just annoys me. Because it's like, well, how? Because the only time you're ever going to arrive there is when you don't want to go there, which is then like,
it's a hassle.
I can't imagine in a game why you would want, like, then what's the point of it?
Why would you be there? Yeah, I agree.
Because what you do is like, well, we need to get to Regulus, and you start walking towards Regulus, and like, oh, you see this mulchy land. Well, we don't need to go here. We'll keep walking, and you just walk on to Regulus. Do you know what I mean? So like, and then when you're like, oh, I really need a Myconid, well, you better not think about it.
Yeah, pretty. Yeah. Do
you know what I mean?
Don't think of a Myconid. Damn it!
Damn it! Exactly. You're gonna be like, it's just like, I don't know, just sort of. As a game concept, as a concept, it's great for like a story, but for a game, I don't know. I'm being a contrarian,
I guess,
or whatever. I'm sorry.
I guess because I don't know. It feels like it goes against this law and order and logic thing.
Yes,
because
that's kind of what. That's what sort of. Yeah, there is a logic to it, but it's not.
And it doesn't really come anywhere else. I mean, just quickly looking back through it as well, like they have this whole thing about non-violence. So, that they're trying to keep out those people who are too turbulent to understand what Mycelia offers. So there can't be any violence. Anyone that entertains violent thoughts can find themselves transported away across Mechanus without their companions. So that's terrifying, because obviously you're thinking to yourself like, don't trust what's going on here, don't like the mulch.
Well, this is why I don't want to get into this, because now I'm going to say that the whole time you're nearly getting poisoned and they want to kill you. So, like,
yes.
I don't that's when it... Oh, sorry. I'm getting in my Hamilton, this is the voice that I do when I'm really annoyed. It's like, well, and I'm doing this with my hands. It's like, if it's not a violent place, but when you're there, it's constantly trying to kill you, and then they're going to absorb your body in a non-violent way. I don't know. I find it falls down.
Maybe again, Myconids. It's that idea that there's a certain order, the life decay stuff.
No, I do.
Maybe.
I know. I get. There's a law. There's an order to life and death, but then they're not. But then, if we're going to get into it, they are enforcing this death prematurely by poisoning you constantly. So.
I love the fact that you would not survive Mechanus. That's what I've discovered about this.
Well, I'd just be there arguing, saying, "Excuse me."
and then you get transported, across Mechanus, and then eventually when you want to,
I just become that
come
person.
back,
Actually.
but then you probably get judged by the circle, so these 9 sort of mycanoid kings, which, if they find you guilty, sentence you to a horrible, rotting death.
Yeah,
you're like,
no,
This
exactly.
is not fair.
No, that's what I mean. This is like, I would just be the whole time just be saying, well, this just doesn't fit the logic. So, like, anyway. So the point is, the problem is now I don't want to go there. I'm going to be the person that's going to end up there. That's the thing, isn't it?
But again, so talking about the spores thing as well, because obviously, again, the reason they sort of talk about this is the idea that machinids are like, they spray spores towards people to like induce a rapport and to be able to speak a common language, because traditionally machinids they can only speak sort of telepathically through the spores. But obviously, as we sort of mentioned, on Mechanus, everyone has at least a shared language. Everyone can understand each other. So you're like, it looks like a threat, right? Suddenly these spores can be like, what's going on? And go, oh, we can speak. Hello, that's okay. And you're like, no, we've always been able to do this. I don't trust this.
Yeah, exactly. I know. So it's really good. I like it.
It's pretty good. It's irritating. I really good. No, but I think it is what you take of it. I definitely would try and make it a bit more ordered, perhaps. I think I would get rid of that sort of like, to get to it, walk away, because you're right. Because otherwise, you're just always going to get stuck there every time, or it's you want players to want to enjoy that realm, I think. But then, I mean, like I said, I quite like the description of it. I quite like, I guess, like, unless like the Myconidkins, like the gods want you to actually go and like help them in some way. Other than that, like you said, like.
Well, I get the whole there's a lot of theories, like if it was something more like, there's a fantastic treasure, but you don't get it until you need it and not by wanting it. Like, I totally get that theory and that concept, or the sort of like, things only appear to you when you're not thinking of it and stuff like that. And I kind of, that's fine to a certain extent. But it's not like once you're there, it's like a fabulous place to be. Like, do you know what I mean? So it's not like it's, there's a desire to be there in the first place. That's kind of what I'm missing, I guess.
No, that's fair. Well, let's talk about the other town it sort of mentions, which a town, again, I've tried to say it off camera and still probably won't get it right. So, Delon Estin Oti. I think that's how we pronounce it.
That's what we're going with. That's what we're going with.
Let's go into it. Delon Estin Oti. So this idea is like a spiderweb town where all the citizens have learnt to anticipate the flow of time, and all the conversations have been sort of already based on what has happened before, to the point where majority of the citizens don't speak at all. They just realise that everything has an order, things have passed, and they can sort of almost predict the future in a way. They offer services for everyone, so that they can predict, certainly for neutrals, what's going to happen for the rest of the day, for sort of lawfuls and goods within the next couple of days, and then within the next hour or so, and then chaotics are like, no chance. No, we don't know. But what I quite liked about it is that they have, obviously, most of them are non-talkers, but there are people who translate for them, the actual talkers, including like the sort of leader of the town, who has a great catchphrase going, I knew you would do that, which I think I'm just going to use that all the time. It's like, of course you do that. I predicted this. You're like, no, you didn't. I knew you were going to say that too, because you didn't believe me.
No, I know, the whole I knew you do that would be so annoying, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and this idea of it's almost quite sad in a way that those who are doing who aren't talking but are predicting the patterns are being translated by those who can talk, but as a result you might not understand the fortune, in quotation marks, that you get, because the talkers are still like 1 degree or so away from them. So there's almost this sort of schism within the townsfolk themselves, that they don't trust those, you actually don't talk to each other. It's not the same, because those people who can talk aren't as ordered as the non-talkers. So I just thought that was quite cool, the description of that.
Which also lies on that concept of those who know don't speak and those who speak don't know sort of theory, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
But I think they're sort of playing with a lot of those concepts of like knowledge and sort of theories on knowledge. I also, and I thought there was a sort of, it was quite sad, that idea that the people who can talk are alienated from both parties, and therefore that's kind of, and that because the communication as well was because they know each other so well, the ones that don't talk, it's that communication with just a simple, like, they might just stand there and go, and then walk away. And that's the whole conversation, because they know what they're anticipating, but purely the raised eyebrow explains exactly the sentiment that needs to be said. Everything. And that's it. And that's all that is needed to have an addendum to their already knowledge, to push them in the right direction of thought. So I think that was quite fun. Yeah. And the architecture of it is like, symmetrical, as you said, with a spider web sort of pattern radiating out from a centre, which I think is quite interesting. And that all buildings are residential and there's no inn or hostel. And the only way you could ever stay there is in someone's house where they've moved or died. So there's like free houses that you can use there. But because there's no need for sort of like shops or anything like that, there's no need for commerce. So they literally have enough food that they give to everyone, and it's all very, laid out like that. So it's kind of weird.
Yeah. It's pretty weird. And I guess the final one we'll go on to before we talk about Regulus, really, we might have mentioned it last episode, but the third layer of Arcadia is here. So we sort of mentioned about last time that this third layer was sort of been transmigrated over to Mechanus, Nemaustus. I think we decided on that pronunciation.
Nemaustus.
Nemaustus.
There's no T in it.
I don't know. That's how
Nemaustus. I don't know.
I'm Nemaustus. I don't know. The third layer of Arcadia. And it's interesting because obviously it was such a big deal about it made in the Arcadia book that we read that here it's actually quite. There's not much in this third layer. It's very woody compared to the rest of it. I think that's the thing. Obviously, all the other cogs, it's all sort of like very shiny. There's no natural creatures here. So instantly it feels like to me there isn't any maybe natural environment per se. There's no like lakes or trees or anything like that. Whereas here in this particular realm, it is woody, and you still have those sort of petitioners, those certain people who did come from Arcadia and happened to end up here. They're still suspicious of you. That's still sort of the sort of after effect from Arcadia sort of bleeding through. But other than that, there's no sort of towns per se or anything like, because they are just trying to protect this layer. Now they're like, well, we've got it now. We're gonna make sure the Harmonian won't come and take it back. So it is like very much like a no man's land type scenario where it's beautiful and lush, but there's not much here.
Yeah, and what I quite like is that they've taken on. And I think there's something you could play with it, because it's already moved once, and then they're saying the Arcadian petitions on the plane, they have learned something of chaos and hatred for those who restrain the good in them, because obviously, like, so they've sort of, instead of like, because they're good, they've got the good alignment whilst this is a neutral alignment, they've also then, as a reaction, are taking more of a chaotic alignment to sort of to like try and maintain their good and go against the ultimate lawfulness of it. And so they've employed chaositecs, which are like another faction who are just all about chaos, just like to make the warrants and stuff, so they can hide away from the governors who are trying to keep it in Mechanus. And what I quite like is there's someone that's trying to stop them being too chaotic, because then it might then shift to somewhere like a chaotic good place, like a Borea or even or something like that, which would be kind of, you could do as like you could have a whole thing that it's becoming more chaotic and it's starting to shift, and you're starting to see like what are the roving bands from Aboria called? The
big parties.
The big party, the Dithyram. Oh, what are they called?
I don't know. They're everywhere though. I think we've talked about them in every episode since then.
Yes, we have. What are they called?
I can't remember off the top of my head. But yes, I like that idea.
And then they sort of maybe you see one of them on the horizon, and it's like, oh no, it's being transported to Arcadia, to Arborea or something like that, and it would be, I don't know, it could be kind of.
I like again that cool story of like following following Nemaustus around, just like it bumps from plane to plane to plane because it doesn't necessarily fit back in, and eventually if it gets back up to Arcadia, it's like home again or something like that. I don't know.
Maybe that's like the whole game is like you're like moving. You're like you. Oh, what if you you try and you get stuck in a plane? Here's an idea, right? You've heard this story. Yeah, and you're stuck in a jail in battle or something like that, and so it's lawful and evil, and someone tells you the story of Nemaustus, and you're like, wait a minute, everyone, start being really good. Be really good to each other right now. Like if you can gather like at least 15 people in this jail, let's all be really good and chaotic. Okay, just do random things. And so then you just have to like convince everyone in this jail to do random things, and suddenly the jail gets transported to a chaotic good plane. And that's your way to escape a jail.
And that's
in
how
hell.
you get out. I don't remember that mod in Skyrim. How you get out of the jail at the beginning. I think Skyrim.
It's a theory.
Yeah, I can't remember. It's a theory. I like that. And then finally, the main sort of realm, Primus's realm. This idea of Regulus, this orderly as clockwork and coolly logical as can be.
Love this place.
It's so cool. Again, the image of it's quite cool. So it's got 64 cogs sort of stacked like a pyramid with a huge sort of rod in between. And it's not sure if it's the rod that turns the cogs or the cogs that turn the rod. I just thought that was an interesting little fact. Yeah. And it's just one giant sort of city or realm. So it's impossibly huge, I think. And you have, again, that idea of the divisions of Modrons. You've got certain Modrons looking after different parts of the cogs, so maybe individual cogs, and then every 4 cogs it's another Modron that looks like an overseer, etc., etc. And then right at the top you have Primus, which is the Modron deity. And the big thing to sort of note about Regulus is that there is this building called the Modron Cathedral, which is it looks spectacular. It's almost like it's constantly in motion. This idea that it's almost flitted around by little Modrons as they're adding stuff to it and making it. It's almost like, what are they building over there? Yeah. So it's getting, and it feels like it's impossibly big, but it's not, and it's just very.
It can make you go mad by looking at it.
It can, yes. It has inside of it. It's got that's
even
it.
The external of it can make you. It says, I think, when
that was it. Yes, you were right. Yes, it's the external of it because you're trying to comprehend it. I guess it's like me in every one of these episodes trying to comprehend something, and just like for me, I'm just like, you know what? It goes beyond my imagination, so I will stop imagining it now. Whereas if it sort of overwhelms you, drives you to madness, I guess. But inside the Modron Cathedral, there is an orrery, which is basically like this huge big model of gears which spin and move, and you can use it as both a scrying device, so again a way to look on maybe what's going on in this realm or what's going on in that realm, but also as a teleportation device depending on if you're careful with it or not. So it talks about various saving throws and stuff that you do to make sure, again, using it you don't like lose your sense of self, but also that you don't and sanity, and make sure you don't suddenly teleport yourself to somewhere that could be quite dangerous, because I can imagine you're on Archaron, or you're looking at Archaron going, what are they doing? And it's suddenly like, oh no, I seem to be in the middle of a battlefield right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Damn it.
I didn't quite understand it, but it sort of says like when you get somewhere within your eye line at your height, so it's like if you're looking down on it, it's sort of fine, but if you then start looking up and going, oh, what's over there? Oh fuck. And then you're there. It's sort of, that's kind of cool.
I think for me, I would, as a DM, I would pick my moment, like depending on how long and you were looking for, perhaps, and like you get, and like the longer you're there, the details get clearer and clearer. So maybe it's only very blurry at the beginning, and then you're hearing a few things and stuff like that. And then if you like lean in closer and closer, then suddenly you're at the war table with the rest of them.
Yeah, you lean over the edge a little bit too far that you lose that balance, like losing the balance on your chair, and you sort of like, oh. Exactly.
Yeah. That's exactly how I saw it. So that's sort of the huge sort of I think an interesting like defining features and geography for it, because they're compared to other planes, I think it's only got a select few of interesting things. Like it's like okay, we've got this and we've got this, and actually I think it's very easy to build on from there. And like you don't have to use the mycelium stuff at all, or the mouse dust stuff. You can just use that for something else as well. Yeah. But I was gonna quickly go on to the magical conditions. Yes. That was all right. So there are some restrictions on magic. I think every plane of law, instead of the chaos ones which up the ante essentially, every plane of law just goes, no. No, we have rules and orders.
Rules as written.
No, don't. What are you trying to do? So stuff like illusionary magic and wild magic are just completely inoperable here. Don't even bother trying it, because it's just not going to work. With conjuring and summoning spells, they will summon creatures that are, I'm quoting from the book here, a perfect slave, but basically are lawful creatures no matter what you're trying to do. And it has this very interesting sort of rule, which I think could be quite tricky, but I guess as long as you, as a DM, just keep in your head. So if you are the opposite alignment spellcasters, so for example, you are a chaotic spellcaster, the lawful creature that you've summoned will only follow what you've asked it to do to the letter of it. So it's not gonna interpret. You have to be careful what you say, because it's just gonna do exactly what you say. So if you are of a similar alignment, there'll be some interpretation. It will genuinely sort of, oh, I see what you said this, but you meant this a little bit. Okay, I can help you in that way. But if you're the same, if you are both of you are lawful, the creature will then ask you, what are your exact intentions? Which I love. It feels like an email you send.
Sorry, could you just explain what you meant by that?
Yeah, I just got your email. Could you just can we have a quick call about this? Just
can we have a quick Teams chat to
yes.
make sure.
Yeah, on the same page. So I think it's again, maybe it might get lost in the big sort of combat per se, but I quite like the idea that definitely chaotics, you'll have to be like, your players are like, okay, I need you to go over there and kill that person with your sword,
Yeah.
and then come back to me, or like, they've got the scroll. I need you to get the scroll without killing them, and just like.
And the scroll is the one in their bag that says that's coloured in this lettering, and
just get their bag. No, the big bag, the one with the backpack that says "I heart paladins" or something like that.
Oh, I've met that paladin.
Yes. I love Perith. Yeah. Divination magic. Again, it just says if it's cast by a chaotic alignment creature, then it will have no effect. But lawful alignments, it will have effect. And it's the interesting one, necromancy. So necromancy is seen on Mechanus as, again, a basic violation of law. And I think this has happened on the other planes as well, I will say. But even healing magic doesn't work too well here. It talks about this idea that for healing magic to work, it requires a piece of the caster's flesh. Or, I would maybe, because it's not like I'll just lop off a hand and you get 5 hit points back. It's not that per se, but like it is using your life force to sort of move your life force into something else. So when you're casting something at a spell level, like a healing spell or a necromantic spell, to bring something to life, it has to require some of your hit points, and there's a ratio it gives in the book, which is, I think, it's really interesting. I don't really know if D&D 5th edition does that per se. If you want to do this at this level, do that. It's because it's not necessarily a optional rule that comes. We'll talk about the optional rule for Mechanus.
The only thing is closer to is the blood hunter kind of thing. That's kind of what it reminds me of a little bit. But other than that, I can't think of anything like level wise.
Yeah, this idea of channeling your energy into from one thing to another. Like I guess we talked recently about Heroes of Kryn, this sort of UA on our sibling podcast, and that talks about this idea like you're expending some of your hit die to help other people and stuff like that. But this is actually your hit points. So it's like actual your current life rather than something in the future you may or may not use.
Yeah, that's true. I think the other one then about elemental magic, it requires the component you need to add to it is the element you want to draw. So you can breathe onto your hand, you can get some, for water you could get a droplet of tears or something like that, or or you could make it, and for dirt it could just be a handful of dirt or like dust in your pockets, or you could, as a DM, as it said, make that more of a trek. Like you need a pound of earth, so you've got to get to Mousus to get some earth because there's nowhere else.
Like, for God's sake.
And that sort of thing, which I think is kind of, and spray a bit of water on your hands. I think it's kind of, I don't know, just a little like nod to it and stuff. Yeah. And the spell keys are cool as well. Yeah.
Yes, the spell and power keys are all sort of cogged themed and sort of interlinked in some way. Again, I bet they would look, again, to describe them would be very cool. Reminded me a little bit, I don't know if you've seen the TV show or read the comics, but the Lock and Key series, which has
I started it. I haven't.
That's all you need to know, is like this idea that there are these keys that unlock certain things, and they look so different and weird, and that's what I had in my head, is that they just all, again, the all different kind of cogs and stuff, and how they all fit together with those spell and power keys, which is very interesting.
Yeah, cool.
The one thing I did want to quickly mention before sort of maybe rounding it off really is I want to talk about and I'm going to say this wrong as well. The labyrinthian portal.
Yes.
I kind of missed this a little bit. So there's two things to this. So there's obviously there's the gatehouse to get in to the automata gatehouse, that's sort of the portal town. But there's also the labyrinthian portal, which is this maze of portals and conduits that sort of link the cogs together. This idea and how you would get from one to another. Because again, this whole plane, this whole realm is just cogs that are all sort of together and you can walk on them, etc. So I guess if you wanted to take a shortcut, you would use this portal. But it describes it as sort of it's not really a maze as we would know it. It's sort of a mental construct that you have to be sort of like focused in on trying to get somewhere. It's almost like, again, I know we've made the joke before about it having been like the Windows screensaver sort of maze, but I think this one is even worse, like, 'cause it's in your own head. It's your mind palace, but you've locked yourself out and you can't remember the passcode. But it's interesting because it talks about only Modrons and other similarly minded creatures can use this labyrinth with certainty. So if you need to get to the next one, you might need to get a guide in to help you, maybe somehow get a Modron to help you, maybe a rogue one to get you, if you need to get higher up into Regulus to go visit the Modron Cathedral, or maybe, I don't know, try and seek an audience with Primus, get one of the Modrons to try and get you in. Would be an interesting one, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it's quite cool, and I think you could work it in game in some interesting ways. But I kind of imagined it like a bit like sort of like you know that shape when you drop it and it always falls and it always rights itself, and it's like a weird. Have you ever seen one? It's like the object that wherever you leave it, it like will right itself upwards.
It's like
it's got a curved bottom and then got like some weird triangles and sort of edges, and it always lands facing upwards. I imagine it's like an ethereal version of that object that you can kind of see, and then you kind of got to walk into it at an angle that you want to achieve. So it's like multi-headed, but not completely regular. But it doesn't look regular, but it's regular in its sort of something. That's kind of how I imagined it, as something like that. And then you enter into it like as an object that's huge that you find, and then the way you traverse it is how you then end up in the next place or something. But
I see now I've got two images. One of that sort of Alice in Wonderland, sort of like the drink me. So you go further away and it's a smaller door, but then you get closer and it's a bigger door to the same size. But now I also think that every time you're like in the labyrinthine portal, it's like, okay, so we need to go away from the door. Oh god damn it, we're back at Mycilla again. Like every dead end you end up at Mycilla. Like no, that's what.
now I
next
like
time,
it. Now I like it if it does that. Actually, too.
Well, just constantly appears up like hello. Like,
want some mulch? No, I don't want any bloody mulch. Just leave me alone.
Stop introducing me to your cousins. I don't want to know. So I kind of just wanted to finish off. So I want to talk about it from the DM's guide. So I want to talk about it from the DM's guide sort of view. So in the 5th edition, as I've sort of always mentioned, is that it's very, very limited on what we have here compared to the Planescape books. So here, the optional rule, there's 2 of them for this plane, which I really love. I really love the first one. So the optional rule, the first one is Law of Averages. So
I thought that was actually in this, to be honest.
I thought it would be too, but I guess it feels like they missed a trick by not. But who knows? While on Mechanus, creatures always use the average damage result for attacks and spells. For example, an attack that normally deals 1d10 plus 5 damage always deals 10 damage on Mechanus, which, again, if for whatever reason they do get into a fight, which I think it would be so silly if they did, because they're instantly going to be arrested by the Modrons and then taken to Regulus for trial. But this idea is like, okay, you hit. No, wait, what's the average? Cool, you do that. What? Yeah. And it's just
great.
That's all it is. No, and it just like gets rid of those beautiful crits easily.
Wait, does a crit not give you double average?
I guess I would just always give it average.
Oh, you'd always give it average. That's evil.
That's
evil. That's the evil Fiona coming out there.
No, I think you'll find that is the neutral way of doing things.
I need glasses for this episode.
Yeah, I've got my glasses on especially for this episode. Actually, the other optional rule is called Imposing Order. So at the end of each long rest that's taken on the plane of Mechanus, A visitor who isn't lawful neutral must make a DC 10 Wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, the creature's alignment changes to lawful neutral.
Well, that happens on other planes in Planescape with the chaos, doesn't it? So I think that's a fair shout as well, to be honest.
I think, but it is a fair shout, but I think it's because it's rather than just being changes to chaotic or changes to good, this one is like lawful neutral. It's like
it
like,
is a big
reset.
one.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
But just to say, obviously, the creature's alignment does revert to normal after 1 day spent on another plane other than Mechanus, and casting the spell Evil and Good spell on the creature also restores its original alignment. So it totally makes sense, I guess. Like I feel like the Wisdom saving throw is low, but then of course maybe you don't. You know, it's funny when
It's
one
kind
of
of
the
funny when
players
someone
do it.
becomes the data character.
It's pretty much the data character from Star Trek. But I guess it adds for some role play as well. I do like the idea that if everyone fails their role, that they all have to because then they can't go, well, we must report this crime to someone. Well, we normally go and solve it. No, we cannot solve it. We must ask for help.
We must get the proper accreditation before we can go and solve this. But
so tell you what, friends, we will go and follow the person. Say you are a criminal over and over again. You have not washed your hands, and just follow them out. Oh dear.
No, I think that'd be fun. I think that'd be hilarious if they all did. I like both of those optional rules, and I would use them both. Yeah. I think I wanted to, on the note of like Mechanus, like I really enjoyed reading this one. I really enjoyed like the story of it and the sort of places of it. But and I said that to you. I said like I've been really enjoying it. But when it came to like thinking about how I would use it, is where I sort of like I weirdly just unlike others I found that surprisingly didn't find it as exciting in a sense, which I thought was weird because I did enjoy all the concepts and the sort of like the places and the mystery, the sort of otherness of it, you know, the sort of like everything being on these cogs sounds really cool and like it would look really cool, but I wasn't then like, I want to write an adventure for here, like unlike other places. Again, I was a bit like that with Arcadia as well, weirdly. Again, enjoyed reading it a lot, really loved the world building, but wasn't like, I need to go here. And I don't know, maybe it's because I'm just evil. I don't know.
No. I think you're fair. I think, like, why would you go to Mechanus when Mechanus can come to you? Yes. And what I mean by that is the Great Modron March, which was an adventure book that came out, 2nd edition, written by Monty Cook, which, again, we talked about a little bit in the Modron episode we did for DM's Book Club, but this idea that, in the Planescape book, every 17 years, but in the Great Modron March adventure book every like 200 and something years.
Yeah, which I thought was because I thought that, and when I read it in here it said 17. I was like, I'm sure it's longer, but I think I only knew of the March from the book, the one you said, the 2 even.
Yeah, exactly. So regardless, every cycle of the big cogs in Mechanus want to do one big turn. For some reason, the Modron armies, go and do a huge big march across all the cosmology wheel, and visit all the planes, and of course, they don't stop for anything. They're like lemmings, essentially. They just keep going forward. So that nice new town, that nice new town you just built, I'm so sorry, it's being mulled over by all these Modrons just walking, carrying on, because they don't stop for anything. They're following this certain path, never changing.
Bacchus. That was the name of the Arcadia people.
There we go.
Because that's what it reminded me of. They're like a Bacchus in a sense.
Yeah, they're like an unfeeling, no drinking on the job.
Yeah, not an extreme version of the Bacchus, which is like they have no care and want to destroy everything. They will just keep walking because you're in the way, sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just an unending thing, and of course, all the different kinds of Modrons are there. And it's great. And in the Great Modron March, I will quickly mention the big sort of adventure hook is that. It tells you all the planes that the Modron army visits in order. So you could easily, if you're going through the planes in general, be like, oh, by the way, there's a march behind you, and you look and you're like, and it just you describes that feature. So it doesn't have to be something like that's in the foreground. It's something like, oh, by the way, you notice there's the last few dregs of a couple of Modrons running to catch up. And you're like, oh shit, it's that march we saw back in Arcaron. And have that sort of in the background. The big reason I sort of mention it is because in the Great Modron March of the Adventure, it's happened early, and everyone's just cleaning up after the last one. You're like, wait, what the fuck? Fuck off! You see the Modrons carrying on, and obviously causing destruction. So that could be the thing, is that you have this basically intergalactic police force invading the planes again, and you're like, well, should we go investigate what's going on? And so that is another reason to go and find out why they've set up early for that. But I think it's more fun to bring that Mechanus out into other planes.
So as well. Modrons in battle sounds much more fun than you with Modrons in taking and like having a rogue Modron or a semi, like it's rogue but it still holds so much of its character as an NPC, like a DMPC.
Yeah.
Perfect. Want one. Like I want to add one.
Want one.
Definitely. And that's the thing about it, and then taking that DMPC back to Mechanus and it involving it again, great fun. It just I think it's just like Pandemonium is like, I want to go there. I want to go to Windglum. I want to meet all these kind of kooky characters and these kind of crazy things where you shout into the wind, and I think players would really enjoy that. And I think, but maybe it's just because I am a chaotic person generally, DM wise, that's probably why I lean more to them, and that's probably...
No, I don't think so. I definitely see. I think Mechanus, as my big thing, because I think it's a really interesting thing. I wouldn't base any more than maybe one session there.
Yeah.
Like, I think the players will go hand in their bounty or get captured by Modrons, have their big sort of trial, etc., and then they have to break out. They're going to have to leave and be barred from Mechanus in some way. I think it's the little fleeting glimpse, because as we've sort of said, Modrons, you don't know where you stand with them. So actually going to Mechanus is probably the worst thing that can happen, because you're going to be stuck with all this bureaucracy and paperwork, and let's face it, no adventurer, no matter how chaotic or how lawful they are, wants to be stuck doing paperwork.
No, even doing the character sheet is hard enough. Let alone more.
Exactly. Well, there you go, Hamilton. We have gone through the various paperworks and the cogs, and Mechanus continues to slowly tick on as well. And again, in my head, I like the idea that when you are on Mechanus, even though it doesn't say anywhere, that there's a sound, that sort of background white noise of sort of ticking slowly or surely with the cogs moving.
Just reminds me of my grandparents' house.
Yeah, reminds me of my parents' house, because there's a lot of clocks there.
There's always clocks. Yeah, exactly.
There's
that's
always clocks. Well, Hamilton, what is the next plane we're visiting? We're saying goodbye to the Modrons. We've given our paperwork. We've given our license. We can leave.
We can leave now, can we?
We can leave now. Where is our next?
Where are we going next? Well, we are going to the splendor of Mount Celestia. Ooh. That is our lawful good, so our ultimate good and lawful plane. It is a huge, near infinitely tall mountain that has multiple layers as you ascend. So the layers, unlike a lot of the layers where it's distance or it's like descending, this is a rising. This is ascendancy. Ooh. As in, in French that they have, you descend the stairs, but you don't ascend the stairs. Only use the word ascend for when Jesus rose to heaven. I think this is kind of the only time in French that you would also be able to use ascendre, because it is a godly ascent upon a mountain top.
Wow. Well, je ne sais pas. Yes.
Quoi?
Quoi?
Encore une fois. And
La Biblioteca. Yes, I know. How exciting. So Mount Celestia, I guess, because when we started this podcast, we obviously looked at the abyss, was the infinite layers of chaos. Yeah. And I always imagine, I've said this before, I think right at the beginning, this idea that for me, when I think of layers, I think of cakes. This horrible idea of like an infinite cake of chaos, and now an infinite cake of goodness, and I can just imagine it being
even
sickly,
more sickly. Yeah. Oh yeah. You know what? I'm just tasting. When you get those big chunks of icing, like you go into a cake, and you think, oh, it's going to have a good balance, and it's like too sweet, frangipane, muck.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
but anyway, we are going to meet cool dragon. We're going to meet a cool dragon. So.
Well, then that'll take the sweetness off a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
So, well, that sounds really exciting. I honestly can't wait to traverse or ascend Mount Celestia. But until then, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and catch up on all the previous episodes and VODs of this show and our sibling show, the DM's Book Club. I'm sure there will be some links popping up at the end here. And until next time, make sure you follow all the laws, and
Mm.
see you on the flip side.
See you on the flip side.
Bye.
Bye.